Socialists have been arguing for 2 decades now that the Iraq War was caused by capitalism. Popular leftist media, like the movie Fahrenheit 9/11, argues that we went to war for oil interests. And these arguments are really nothing new. Leftists have been arguing that capitalism causes war for over 100 years, especially after Vladimir Lenin wrote about it. But they have been consistently wrong about this. The evidence does not support them. The historian Dr. Rainer Ziedelman, in Chapter 9 of his book In Defense of Capitalism, completely dismantles this argument. He talks about World War I, World War II, and the Iraq War. He writes, quoting a German political scientist who has written extensively on this topic, "There is no evidence that the US oil industry in any way beat the drum for the invasion of Iraq. If anything, the opposite was true. US oil companies had long wanted US and UN sanctions lifted so that they would not fall further behind their competitors from France, Russia, and China in the race for Iraqi oil concessions. As almost always, big business wanted business, not war." An article in Counterpunch written by Roger Burbach all the way in 2003 argues something very similar. Big oil companies were not enthusiastic about the Iraqi war. Administration neoconservatives like Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz are dreamers, driven more by ideology than by concrete material interests. The Marxists, of course, argue that these wars are driven by material interests or by material conditions. They believe the United States is virtuous and has a mission to remain indefinitely as the world's sole superpower. This is not some niche libertarian free marketer perspective. Many mainstream historians and journalists have argued that the Iraq War was not about oil, and provided much evidence for this, such as the authors of The Israel Lobby or the author of The Road to Iraq. The journalist Danny Postal wrote an excellent article summarizing The Road to Iraq. He quotes the authors saying, "If Iraq was invaded for oil, then the US was remarkably negligent in securing the prize. Iraq gave its big oil concessions to Norway, France, China, and Russia, not to the United States." Back to In Defense of Capitalism, there's also the fact that Saudi Arabia, which has larger stocks of oil and would have been an easier adversary, would have made a far more suitable military target, not heavily armed and populous Iraq. Attacking Iraq for oil interests would have been completely irrational in every way you look at it. The road to Iraq was paved with neoconservative intentions, as Danny Postal writes. It was not capitalist interests. Summarizing Stefan Berling's analysis of the war, Dr. Ziedelman writes, "Main reason for the war was for the United States to set a precedent by demonstrating its military might and, as a result, to change the risk calculus of all potential enemies of the United States after the September 11 attacks. The war was intended to demonstrate to friend and foe alike that the US should be taken seriously, was fully capable of taking decisive action, and to send out a stark signal that countries that cooperated with terrorists would pay a high price. The war was started for flawed ideological and political ambitions, not for profits."